Hey, how's it going? Welcome to Angular-meteor. I'm Justin Schwarzenberger, and on today's show, we're going to be covering GraphQL and Apollo. Pretty excited to get that started. Before we begin, let me tell you about some upcoming training. John Papa and Dan Wallin will be doing a 2-day intensive Angular 2 training class down in sunny Fort Lauderdale, Florida on October 6th and 7th of 2016. They'll be covering all the basics to get you up and running with Angular 2. So come enjoy some education and some beach time. Go to ng-learn.com to get your ticket. All right, on today's show, we're going to be covering GraphQL. Pretty excited about this. It's a pretty hot topic. I think you guys are going to love it. If you guys have any questions today, feel free to tweet those out using the hashtag ngAir, all one word, and we'll look through those questions and hopefully get to a few of those at the end of the show. Hit our guests and our panelists up with those. So today on the show, for our panelists, we have Mike Brocky joining us. Mike, how's it going?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me on.
Good. And we got Jim Cummins. Jim, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
All right. And we got Dimitri. Dimitri, how are you doing?
All good. Thank you.
Good, good. And our guest that we got on the show today, Uri Goldshtein. Uri, how are you doing?
Hello, how are you? Thank you for having me.
So Uri, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you got going on, and give us a rundown.
So first of all, I've been working with the Apollo team from the Meteor company for a few months now on a client for Angular for GraphQL, which made me learn a lot very early about GraphQL and why it's a very interesting thing. It's already out, and it's very, very interesting, and the technology is very interesting. Like for me, it's very interesting just to present the technology to the Angular community, whatever client you want to use. So, yeah.
Very cool, very cool. All right, so GraphQL, let's get started with that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what it is, and really, like, what does it solve for us, right?
So first of all, I want to just say that I have a surprise for those who already like using Angular and GraphQL and Apollo. Then I got with me here, we can squeeze in together, Camille, who is the top contributor for our repository. And we worked together, and we came here together to San Francisco to work with the Meteor and Apollo team, and work with the Angular team to get it all, to show them all the stuff that we were doing, and to like get feedback from them. So it's been very interesting. So yeah.
Hi everyone.
Nice awesome. Thanks for joining us. Glad you could be here. Cool.
Yeah, so we're squeezing tight here, so it's going to be interesting. Yeah, so GraphQL, how to start? Well, it's basically an enhancement that you can add to your app on top of that serves the same purpose, let's say, in your front-end app as a REST endpoint, as a REST API. So it's a new protocol. It's an open source protocol that Facebook introduces. They have been using it internally since 2011 or 12, I think. And they open sourced it a bit over a year ago. And there's many advantages of this protocol, and we'll talk a bit more about it when we go in. But like quick things that you immediately get when you use it is, first of all, the API is by nature it's always self-documented. It's always like document itself. Like if you have the API, you have the documentation. Like it's tightly coupled. You can change it. It's a typed API, so you know exactly the types that you're going to get from the server. You can also, like as a client, you can ask the server, what fields can I get from the server? So you don't need to start talking to all kinds of like backend developers figuring out what you're going to get from the REST endpoint, and then if something inside the REST endpoint changed, then you understand it when you get it into your app. And it's also more efficient. Like the client asks the server what it wants, so you will only get the fields that you need. So actually, for mobile, like the reason Facebook used that is they needed a faster and better API for their mobile apps. They did a huge revolution, a mobile revolution in 2012, and they needed a better API, more efficient API, while still using their old backends. So then they introduced this technology, and basically, if you're like writing modern web apps and you want to get fast connection, then this is also more efficient than the standard REST for client-server information. Yeah, and one thing is important, like when I started talking about it, is that before we start diving into it, is that it's not like a technology against REST. We're not gonna do the REST is better than this is better than that. It's you can use it with REST together in your same app. You can and then you can slowly migrate into that, or just use it in certain endpoints where it makes sense and certain components of your app. Yeah, so this is an important thing to know. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've kind of discovered diving into it is really there's that problem when we build these client-side applications, right? That we're now thinking about we got to make these calls to get our data from the client, right? And then we want to compose our views and maybe have this rich information that we're showing that touches multiple pieces of data. And how do you do that without making a ton of XHR calls, right? And also, how do you do that and only bring back the data that you need for that particular UI? And I think that's where this whole GraphQL story fits really nicely, is that you start running into this and going, how do I solve that? And how do I make that efficient? And it's like, oh, GraphQL has a nice solution for that, right? So
yeah.
What about, so tell us about Apollo and how does that fit in?
So Apollo is first of all, we're a team that is focused around GraphQL, providing tools around GraphQL. So it means that we provide tools for the client, and the client means any JavaScript or a native client. So we have tools for just a regular JavaScript client. We have tools for Angular 1, Angular 2, React clients. There's iOS and Android clients on the way. And also we provide tools on the server. So if you want to use like to have more tools to write your GraphQL endpoints on the server, then we provide some tools to help you with that. You can use it with whatever like server you want. It doesn't matter the language, and also doesn't matter. Let's say if you use Node, doesn't matter which, like if you use Happy or Express or whatever, you can use our tools with whatever framework you're using. And also, we actually last week we introduced a small thing is and this is all open source. We don't sell it, we don't do anything, but we do sell a product that is kind of, it helps you look around onto all your organization GraphQL endpoints and to let you get better information about what endpoints are more expensive, how can you improve your API, because with GraphQL you get so much more information, and there aren't tools that actually gives you all that information like very easily. So that's Apollo. And I'm focused obviously more on the Angular side. And what I wanted to say is that why do actually you need clients? So there's the Angular client, for example. And one interesting thing is that, and GraphQL is like REST, right? It doesn't need to be anything of framework specific. You can use it with any clients. But one very cool thing about GraphQL is that when you specify your requirements for your data, they can be statically analyzed, which means that the client can do very interesting stuff. And this is actually I think maybe the most exciting thing about it. In Angular 2, we introduced a lot of, and also now it's becoming also in Angular 1, we introduced a lot of new concepts. For example, components. So now everyone is talking about components. Everyone is like taking self-contained components, and it's all fine. But I don't know if it's because the Angular 1 is not in production, but it looks like it's going to be very soon, like going to be the final version. nobody is talking about how different it makes for the way you fetch your data from the server. So yeah, all your components are like self-contained, but then you call one global service to fetch your information from the server. So your components are not self-contained anymore, right? Like if let's say I can maybe show some. I'll try to do it with my hands, but maybe. But if you have like a child component and a parent component, and now you fetch the data from the server from the parent component, or some kind of store, whatever you do, like a general store if it's Redux or ngRx, then if the child component changed, now you need to change the data requirements also in other places, so it's not self-contained anymore. But let's say with the Apollo client and the Angular client, and it doesn't matter, even with the Relay, if you want to use Relay, then you can specify the data requirements of each component, self-contained inside the component, and the clients will go over and fetch those requirements and merge them into one single request from the server. And it's important because if something changed in the child component, let's say you want to fetch not only the name and the picture, but you want to fetch the name, the picture, and the age, you just change it in that single component, and that's it. All the rest of your application doesn't need to know about it. If like you have teams scattered around different parts of your app, they don't need to know about it. Like Facebook has, I don't know how many teams, and that's how they do and organize their things. And for me, it says that we need a new, now that Angular 2 is going to be out and we're going to embrace new standards or new best practices, we need also to get new tools and new best practices to fetch the data from the server that fits to those new things that we all learn now, like components and things like that.
Right. Well, I think we definitely want to see some examples of this and see this stuff in action. But before we do that, so just kind of recap. So GraphQL is really this server-side type of solution that provides, similar to your concept of a REST or some other API data endpoint, that's going to give you a way to request data and get data back, that sort of thing. And you're crafting this with GraphQL on the server side. And then you have that, like you mentioned, you could consume through any client kind of by hitting this endpoint, right, and using the specification. And then Apollo comes into play because it can help you do that within your frameworks and platforms that you're using to kind of compose the stuff that you could do manually, but helps kind of tie that stuff together and make that even easier, correct?
Yes. Yes, I mean, the Apollo client actually, like, it's an easier way to use it into your Angular apps. If we're talking Angular 2, then we provide service like Apollo service that you can inject to your component, or we can provide a decorator to put on top of your component. And with Angular 1, you can actually just use the Apollo client itself and just wrap it with like a dollar promise or something. But we can also provide you that if you need. And the important thing about what you said about the server-side technology, for me, I look at it as a middleware, because I used to be, maybe that's just the way I'm looking at things, but I used to be an Angular consultant, like in some big companies, and usually you come in as an Angular consultant and you make all the client side nice, but then you need to call the server, and they're not playing nice with you, and for me, GraphQL it's perfect for that, because I can put like a middleware that I write in Node. That is basically, I'm writing there the same code that I used to do on the client side, right? Because until now we used to call a few REST endpoints and then merge the data on the client side with very not really good tools to do that, and then serve it and we'll do all that in the client. Now GraphQL comes in as a middleware technology that I know Node, so it's very simple for me, and that gives me tools to call the same REST endpoints on the server, and then serve to the client just the data it needs with just one request. So it gives him more tools as a, let's say, as a client developer to separate like I don't want to say horrible things, but to separate the things that I don't like on the server and get only the things that I need from the client, and it gives him more freedom. And it also gives me, I don't know, I keep being, like also in Meteor, I kept talking about, in the Angular community, about the server and things like that. I think it's a good starting point for front-end developers to dig into more like full stack stuff. Like it's very easy. You use Node, you use very simple tools, and you can start doing more. Then.
Cool, very cool.
I have one quick question.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So you mentioned that Apollo allow you to dive from the child component or the parent component into child components to grab additional data for down the component tree. Is there a way to specify that you don't necessarily want to walk into a component to grab its child data? Because otherwise, I could see you possibly loading way too much data up front rather than just maybe the one or two children down that you wanted.
Yeah, and that's a good question because so there's two very, let's say, I hope I'm not missing anyone, but hurting anyone, but the two biggest clients of GraphQL in JavaScript clients are Relay and Apollo. And Relay is developed by Facebook, and there's no Angular client for that. But it's also very, very opinionated. And in Apollo client, we tried first of all to support any client you want, like it doesn't matter what framework do you use, but also you can customize any behavior that you want to do. So you can specify, we do a lot more also than what I've said, but let's say refetching, while long polling, we're going to support subscriptions for live data, and which are new things, but it's all customizable. So you can decide when to fetch a component, you can decide not to fetch any component, or a certain component. Yeah, you can do, of course. Yeah, that's a good question.
Cool. All right, can you give us some demos here? Show us some code, kind of dive into the thing and see what it's all about.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna just. So first of all, maybe just wait. I'm sharing my screen. Okay. Let me know if you see that.
Yeah.
I'll make it a bit bigger. So.
Perfect.
So it's a very it's very not technical demo, but I think it's important to start. Let's say that I have a server. I wrote my Angular app, or I'm trying to write my Angular app, and I need to start talking to the server now, and I have no idea what I'm gonna get. So first of all, what you see here, it's called GraphQL. It's a tool that is based on the fact that GraphQL gives you all that information on the API that you're using. So I can just add this tool to my server, and instantly I can query the server with whatever I need. So for example, I have no idea like what am I gonna get now, but I can just do this, and I can look at the query, and I can see that I have all the information here from the server. And nobody needed to write this documentation. Okay, it's just by having a GraphQL API, you get that for free. So now I can just start experimenting. So I can start writing here, and I get like all this, auto-completion things. And I want to from all films, and I want, let's say, I don't know what film is. So if I go to all films, I see that it has films connection. It's type of films connection, and then I think I can get let's say let me just I don't remember. Oh yeah, I need to load films, and then I need a parameter like after 1. and then for each film I can get, let's say, a title. And I'm totally experimenting here. Like, this is something that I haven't remembered. Like, I don't remember even how I did it at the beginning. So I'm just looking at the documentation. So let's you know what? Let's take the first 5 films, and then I'll get the films. Sorry for the things, and then I'll get the title. Sorry for the. I'm just experimenting here, but now you can see that I get films, and this is like a regular query. All the films, and from all the fields I get just the first 5, and the first it actually it's all kinds of tools that I get out of the box from GraphQL. I get the first 5. It's something that with REST there's no standard for these things. There's all kinds of ways you could get it, but in GraphQL there's one way of doing this. And that from the films, I get the title. But I don't know, maybe I can get more things from the film. So I just look at here, and I can get, let's say, starships. Or let's say, I'll take a director, for example. So I just add a director, and I call the same API. Think about the same REST endpoint, but now I'm getting the title and the director. And there's more information out there, but I don't get the only information. I just get the information that I need. And if you think about, this is the query from the client. That's all. Like, it's super, super simple. And I get only the information that I need. And if I'm looking at it, if I would compare it into, let's say, REST and query parameters, then this makes more sense for me. This is just easier. But now there's more things that I can do. So, for example, I want to get characters. So I'll get the character connection. I can see here again the characters that play in the film. So I'll take the character connection, and let's take the first, I don't know, 3. And then I need a character. The characters themselves, the 3, and let's say I don't know what a character has. So a character is the type of a person. Again, you see it's typed, and it means that I can also have validation. So if I know now that a character has a name, so I can now get, if I'll query this thing, I'll get all the films with like the first 5 films with their titles and directors, and the characters for each film with their names in one request, one single request, and I haven't changed anything on the server. I'm querying the same server, so this is very strong. But also, if you look, because it's a type thing, so let's say I made a mistake and I'm getting the age. There's no age. Oh, wait, so it autocorrect me. But if there's an age and there's not age, then I can actually validate that. You see that now this is something that happens on the client. I can validate that I'm making a wrong API request on the client before even deploying the server, before calling the REST API. I get that for free, and I think this is very powerful. This is saves tons of time if you work with an old backend or things like that. And I can go as deep as I want, okay? So I can go, let's say, now we have characters, but maybe we want for each character to see how many what starships they use. So I'll go to Starship Connection, and for each starship, let's take, for example, Starship, and then I get the starships, and for each starship, let's take the name and the model. Name and model. And I went even one level deeper, and I got it all in one request. So this is, again, very powerful, and I can go as deep as I want here. I can go 5 levels in, I can go 7 levels in, and I get everything in one request. Now, this is something that's called a Swappy. Swappy is the REST API for like Star Wars figures. If you look at the REST API itself, like the regular API that it's based on, which is probably, it's a very, very, very well designed REST API. It's like a good example for best practices and things like that. If I go to the documentation, this is so long, I have no idea where to start it. You know? It's crazy. Like, I can go here, and it's amazing how this thing makes it so simple.
And if you were going to want to query all that stuff directly from that REST API, doing exactly what you just did, we'd be making multiple calls to different REST endpoints at that point, right?
Exactly, exactly. So again, you can think about each of those things as just one request that you would do from a certain API call, which already will solve you a lot of like API calls. Like the interesting thing, I did the same, like very similar demo in my Barcelona talk, and there was really poor connection there, and I was really nervous. But it worked because it was one REST call. If it was few, I think there was not a chance it would work. And then you can also think about it as, let's say, if we're talking about the Apollo client, you can think about it as, let's say, there's a parent component that brings the title and the director. But then you render a child component that brings the characters and the names. And then that renders another child component that renders the starship. And now that starship component, let's go, where is starships? Then that component changed, and now they're also bringing in the length of the thing, the length of the starships. So you get the same API, you get the same thing, but the parent components haven't changed at all. So this is very powerful. The server hasn't changed, and all the other components in your front-end app hasn't changed. So this is a very simple demo for just the API. You can use this, like this is a public, it's a public thing that Facebook shared, and you can use that. They build it to show an example and to show GraphQL, and anyone can use it and play with it. Yeah, and that's the first demo I wanted just to show. Without even talking about Angular and things like that, I wanted to show the power of this. Like, how can you, how powerful it is.
And so the query that you were writing on the one side, if we notice, it mapped to the data that you got back. So you're not only querying that data, but you're also shaping the response data that you want back, right?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Exactly. So I know exactly what I'm going to get. And for example, it brings it to another important thing to say that a lot of people are asking. They're asking, okay, but what about post requests? What if I want to, or RPC? What if I want to change something on the server and not just querying? So GraphQL is also that. It's not just querying. And I'm telling you that because of what you said, because I can shape the response in post request. I can send post request, and I'm not sure exactly what I'll get back as well. So, but with GraphQL, I can send it's called a mutation. It's a request to change the data. But then I can also specify how I want the response to be. So if I'm a client, and I think this is an amazing feature for if you build forms or anything like that, because you can specify what is your validation as a client that the data is fine, and you can also specify when you post a form and you wait for a response, you can specify exactly what the response will be that will help you to get the best experience for the user when its data changed, like you click the form and say clicked yes, you know exactly the data. You can specify the data that you want to get back, so the experience will be as easy as you want as the client developer, because you know that better from the backend developer. So, okay, so yes, this is very powerful.
Okay, so let me get this straight before I get too excited about this, because it's kind of exciting, right? So typical REST or any other endpoint, right? I'm posting my form data, saying here's my new order, here's all the data, and that endpoint is going to give me back my order information in this full thing, right?
Yeah.
But in here, I can use with the mutation and do the post saying here's my update, my data. Oh, and by the way, only give me back the order ID because I don't care about the rest.
Exactly.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Right?
And you said like the good, the happy scenario. Like you might be just getting like I don't know, 200, or just get like yes, or whatever the server developer decided to post at that time. And there's another, like I'll also just, I'm sorry, but I have to say another thing about this same scenario, that we also support in Apollo client something called optimistic UI. So let's say you send the post, the user clicks save. You can immediately, you don't need a spinner or anything like that. You can immediately change the data. Say, okay, I presumably it works. I assume it works. And then the data will change instantly. The user won't need to wait. But then when the server gets the data back, the data that you requested, you can say, okay, forget about this optimistic data that I just invented for the user to be happy. Here's the real data. So the user gets like instant feedback. It doesn't need to wait, and it doesn't feel like a site. It feels like an app.
Right, and these are things that people could say, oh, well, I could solve these things in these other ways, right? It's not how big of a deal it is, but really we're talking about, when we think about the performance, the delivery, the size of our apps, the fact that we're living in this client-side application, that really at that point that's given to the user, and then from there they're making all these micro requests going on. I mean, we have to be cognizant of the payload, the size of those things, and then how that thing changes over time, and the UIs that we want to implement, right? And this gives us so much more control over that ability to manage those things that are important, especially when we talk about mobile and all these other ways to deliver these applications. It really surfaces as something that's like, cool, I need to solve that, I need to be paying attention. Oh, nice, this thing helps me do that.
Yeah, I think you put it like perfectly right. Like my guess is that now that people would start talking about, start experimenting with, more and more people will start experimenting with Angular 2. And then probably, okay, so there's a lot of information about how to write a component, and there's great tutorials people all over the community are writing. But then probably their first question they will get into when they write real app is, okay, how these things change the way that I'm calling the server, right? Like, and I Googled a bit about this question because I want to probably write a blog post about it like next week or something. But so I Googled like this question, and there's a lot of open. If anyone wants to get points now on Stack Overflow, there's a lot of open questions in Stack Overflow that are just like dead empty. Like, how do I get the data if my parent? What is the best practice to fetch data from my child component and parent component when the child, just what we talked before? Yeah, so I guess that will be like the next thing that most people will ask.
So Uri, I have one question for you. So you talked about Apollo client. What is Apollo's server component that goes with it, and do I have to use Apollo client with Apollo server, or could I just use GraphQL? How does that work?
That's a perfect question. Yeah, one of the things we're thinking about the name, and when you say Apollo server and Apollo client, people instantly think, oh, so I have to use them both, or they're somehow connected. But there's no connection at all. It's it's like different people working on different sides, building different tools. GraphQL is the middleware, is the standard. It's like when you use REST, you have no idea and no assumption about what's happening on the other side in terms of technology and implementation. And this is exactly the same here. So Apollo Server gives you a few tools that help you, specifically if you write JavaScript node servers, to use GraphQL. But first of all, you don't need to use them. You don't have to use them. It just helps, and you can write graph. So, for example, Facebook released a server-side implementation in Node of GraphQL. So you can just use that. So Apollo Server is actually like it's an enhancement for that. It's the tools that help you to use that thing. But you can also write like a GraphQL server in .NET. You know, you can write the GraphQL server in Python. So if you're the front-end developer and you don't have any access to the backend server, you can write it in Node as a middleware. But if you're a full-stack developer, or if your backend developers are also really excited, you got them really excited about GraphQL, they can just use the .NET client or any other client that you need. So.
Cool.
So,
all right, next demo. What you got for us?
Well, before you do, I have a question because I'm going to assume that you're going to get into Angular here, the Apollo client.
Yes.
So my question is, I saw a lot of types in the tool that you were using to show the sample querying of the Swappy API there, the Star Wars API. Do any of those types then come down through the query into TypeScript? Because that would be phenomenal to say, hey, you've got types and you're defining that there. Then in my code, when I'm performing that query, that I get to see that, all right, eye color is one of the fields I saw as a string, so I'll know that that value's there.
That's a really great question. Yes, so we had a meetup on GraphQL. I think it was two weeks ago, and actually one of the guys who talked were. So actually, when I met Stefan from the Angular team, I think a month ago. I got here to San Francisco, and that was the first question. Because what happened is that we built kind of like a demo app together. It's called Apollo Ship. I can later on I can post a link for it. And we built it like the Angular team built the front end, and we built and then we connected the Apollo client into it. And one of the things that happened is that the people who wrote it on the Angular team, they wrote interfaces. TypeScript interfaces for the components.
Mm-hmm.
But then when we got in, the first thing I saw was, okay, you have interface, let's say, for a car. And a car has many information. But the small component don't need all the information of the car. It needs just like parts of it.
Right.
Right. It does so you need somehow to connect those two. And it's the first question you want to say. And I think that's also we tell everyone to use TypeScript, and then using REST or not GraphQL is it's also kind of like using JavaScript without the types. So sorry for the wrong story, but then 2 weeks ago, and I said, yeah, we can do that for sure. We're actually doing something very similar on the iOS client, because the iOS client is written in Swift, and we want to generate the types, the Swift types from the queries. So we said, yeah, we do it with the iOS client, and we'll get to TypeScript as well. But this is, I think, something that the community can and should do. I would love help if someone wants to just experiment with that. I think it's amazing. But then 2 weeks ago, in the meetup came the guy who wrote GraphQL, this cool editor that I showed before. And he said, he basically showed how they use an internal, in Facebook they use Flow, but he showed how they generate. They have all kinds of approaches. They took 3 approaches. At the beginning, they just generated the code, and then they did some other stuff. I'm sorry that I don't remember exactly, but I'll send also the link to the talk. They showed their way of how they generate types, and we can use the same thing with Flow or TypeScript to generate exactly the types that you need when you need them. So it was a very good talk. I'll reference the link to the talk in the end of in the comments or wherever we post them, and I think it's a good opportunity for someone from the community to look at the same work that they've done on Flow and do the same for TypeScript and TypeScript in general, and Angular developers in particular. So, yeah.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's squeeze some more demos in here. What you got?
Okay, so let me think. What do I do? Okay, let's do Angular, right? That's what we're here for. Let me see what I got. Okay, so I have an Angular, a very simple. So this is an app that I showed. Wait, I'll make it a little bit bigger. Can you see my screen?
Yep, that's good. Thank you.
So I have here a very simple app that we actually presented it in the Boston meetup. I'm not sure if there's a video. I think there is. And we presented, it was a shared presentation with the GraphQL team from Facebook and myself. And Stefan from the Angular team was there as well. And they presented, they actually created two APIs server. One is a REST API server, and one is a GraphQL API server that serve the same data. And then they created a Jquery app, a very simple Jquery app that reads this data. So let me just run it. So we have student npm start. Yeah, so we have this thing, and now let's run. Start this one. Okay. The gods of live demos will bear with me, and yes. And this is a very simple app, as you can see, but I think it shows what we've talked about before, where we have an author, and then for each author we have his books, and for each books we have the name and the picture, and very simple. But what I wanted to show here, and this demo also, by the way, I won't show all the demos here because I'll focus particularly this time on Angular 2, but I can also, later I'll send the link to the repo because there's an Angular 1 example. And just to say that the Angular 1 example here is very interesting because it shows that, for me, it's very interesting because it shows that in Angular 1, we want to use the same best practices as we use with Angular 2, right? And then and it shows why it's also relevant. All the things that we're talking about Angular 2 also relevant to Angular 1. Like, I don't see that difference from the apps that I'm writing now from Angular 2 and Angular 1. I feel like it's more like a conceptual change and less of I mean, there's also obviously a lot of the framework change, but I think the conceptual change is even more important. So everything I'm saying here is also means exactly the same for Angular 1, not only for Angular 2. So it's a very simple app. Let me think what should I show? Okay, so there's an app component, and the app component is actually like shared, is rendering the author component. Very simple. Sorry for the TypeScript things here. I will dig into that later and not now, but a very simple component with the author and the image and the author and the name, and then the book and the image and the book and the title. Now that's cool, and we have few ways of how to serve this data, right? So in a regular app, what we would do, and let me change here so we'll just do the first way of like getting the data. So I have here 3 ways of fetching the data. We'll call it fetch 1, fetch version 2, and fetch version 3. And it's nice because it wasn't my idea. It was the idea of the Facebook developers, and it was a very good idea to show how do we usually fetch this. So you can see that the first way of fetching it from the REST endpoint. Let me maybe show the REST API. I won't show. Well, the best thing to show actually is to look at the schema. No, I want it. We don't let me. Okay, I'll just show how we fetch data. You will get it. But if you have a question, tell me. I'll try to not be too slow and not be too deep. So tell me to go faster or slower. So the first way we usually fetch data is we get the authors. We have a single REST endpoint to get all the authors. Then we get the authors, and then from each author we get the books for each author. And then we get the books for each author. And when we get this request, we go and fetch the information for each book by its ID. And then we get the data. And that's cool. So if we look here, I'll refresh this. Hopefully it will work.
I think it's because you have no REST endpoint started. So
I think I started it. Yeah, I have a REST endpoint started. But I didn't do the. Is it the real data or sample data? I don't remember. Let me look. Sorry, like the gods of the thing. No, this is supposed to be okay. I don't remember why.
Okay, so maybe we'll get something there.
But let's look at how does the network look? Look at the authors. Authors is fine.
Oh, this is because of this. So you have no access to.
That's right. Okay, so okay, I won't fix it right now, but I'll show it anyway. So this is how we used to do it, okay? And if you look, I don't change anything in the app. The app is doing exactly the same, but then there's the second way of how we do it is we'll go and tell the server people, okay, and if we're lucky, they'll do what we tell them. They say, okay, we need all that information. Can you create a new REST endpoint that brings all the information that we need? And so if we're lucky, they're going to do that. And then they'll create another REST endpoint, and then we'll get everything, right? We'll call the REST endpoint and get everything back. And that's nice, but now if something changed, we need to change that everything URL. And it's a thing we need to maintain. And also, we'll get so much information for that everything. I hope this will work. I'll change it here, and I'll hope the API will work.
It's working locally.
Okay, and then we get now this version of the API of the REST API works. But if we look at the information, let's refresh this and do the thing again. So you see that the everything endpoint, if we look at the response, we get so much information that we don't need, right? Like, because now it's the everything endpoint. I get tons of information. I don't need that information, and I still get it. So it makes everything slower, and it makes the server development. And now they need to maintain more things, and probably there will be bugs and everything. But then I'll go to the last way of fetching things, which is a very simple, and this is how the only thing you need to do to use Apollo in your Angular app. You just need to do npm install Angular 2 Apollo, and then you just import the service. You need to initialize the client. I'll show you how to do it. You need to define, like, where is that API that you want to use, and you can define all kinds of, like you asked before, like especially for like particular information or customizable information if you want to change that. And then the only thing you need to do is just to crawl that service and just specify the query. And this query, you just copy paste it from the same editor that I showed you before. This is an ES6, a template thingy. I don't remember the name, but I just specify in one query all the information that I need, and and I get exactly that information with one call. Let's look at that. So I'll refresh the thing, and you can see that I have one GraphQL request, and I get exactly. Is it big enough? I don't know. But can I increase this? I hope you can see this, but I get exactly the data that I requested in one go, and I don't know if you see that as well, but the rendering of this is actually faster. So because it is actually faster, and there's a lot of more ways of how to improve that and how to make. You can also use it with server-side rendering. You can get that information from the start, from when you first render the app, and make it faster. But in general, it's just more efficient, and faster. And let's say I want another field. Let me try something. I don't know if we added here. It's not the server. Yeah, it's the server is 5,000, I think. I'll try something. I hope it works. Okay, so you see that I'm looking now at the server that I wrote, and I have the same editor. So now if I'm looking, let's say that I want to add now from the book, I want to query more things. So I can look at the book, and I can see that it also. So let's do a test. I'll just take this simple thing. This is the same query that I've done. I'll put it here, and I'll get the same information. And now I'll add the description. Okay, I'll test it, and I'll see that I get the description. Then I'll just copy paste it back into my query, and hopefully, again, if the gods of the live demos will work, then if I look at the graphical endpoint, I get also the description. So that's very easy. Like if I'm thinking about the day-to-day development when I'm working against my API, and I can just go here and experiment and add the author, and then I need the author ID or I don't know if or I'll get the first two, and then for the author I get the name, and that's how I work in my day-to-day. And yeah, I don't. Yeah. And then I get the name, and I get this thing here, then I just copy paste it back to my code. I just see that it saves me so much time. So again, that's how it looks. Like if you look at the actual app, the app is looking exactly like a regular Angular app. This is the part where I'm initializing the Apollo client. I can do, this is like the credentials, same origin. So if you saw that my bug before that I didn't specify the cross-origin thing, then I can just specify it here on the when I'm defining the Angular client. And other than that, my app basically looks the same. So adding Apollo into your Angular app is super simple. It's as simple as defining bringing the Apollo to Angular to Apollo from here and calling the query. Yeah, I guess that's the second demo.
All right, very, very cool. Well, we're actually running out of time. We've got to wrap things up here, so I guess we got the 2 demos. But why don't you tell us more where we can get more information and start playing with this stuff?
Yeah, so first of all, sorry for the demo. It took a lot more longer. My idea for the third demo was to do what I've shown before on. Actually, you can put those queries, the same string that I copy-pasted from the thing, but for each component, and change it inside the component. So this is a very powerful thing, and that was my next demo. But to see it, then first of all, I think first thing, if you want to learn actually about GraphQL, then there's a site called learngraphql.com, I think. That is super good. Like just in general about GraphQL, I think it's a very good starting point. Then when you want to start it with your Angular app, you can go to the Apollo website. You can write, I think, I'll share the link, of course, but you can just write like Angular GraphQL or Angular Apollo or whatever. And there's a lot of demo apps that shows those things, and we have docs. And yeah, and there's more like talks that I gave, and I think Camille is doing you're doing a workshop, I think, tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow at our time. It will be like 10 a.m. I think for Angular Zone. Yeah, exactly.
So Angular Zone, there's going to be a workshop tomorrow, which will go much deeper than I do, and yeah, so you can just come and try then. Oh, and you can we have a Slack channel, Apollo Slack. Just ping us there, and you can ask like general questions, or you can privately just message us. We love to help.
Very cool. All right, we'll get those things up in the show notes, links for people. So we got to get this thing wrapped up. We got our a second show coming up right after this on NG1 to NG2, how to migrate with Joe Eames. So we got to clear out for that. So let's get to our picks real quick, and we'll wrap it up. I'll start with my pick. I want to talk about Ben Nadal. He's a guy who's out there doing a lot of write-ups on his blog. I want to plug his blog, bennadel.com. He's diving into all kinds of Angular 2 stuff, and he basically puts up blog posts and videos about his experience. So really trying to learn and understand the stuff. A ton of great content. You can also follow him on Twitter at bennadel.com, or Ben Nadel, BENNADEL. So that's my pick. All right, Mike, what you got?
Sure. My pick today is NGRX. A lot of people have been talking in the community, not just Angular, about Redux. Take a look at NGRX as a way of centralizing your state in an immutable object to be able to have those changes observed throughout your application. So taking advantage of the power of observables through NGRX. Definitely recommend it.
Cool. And Jim?
Cool. Yeah, Uri actually already talked about two of mine. First off is learngraphql.com, and the second one is Graphical. Those are like the two gateways to GraphQL Zen if you want to start off somewhere. And then the third one is a package that I just released called Gra. It's GRA. When you're writing your backends in GraphQL, you have to repeat GraphQL integer type over and over and over. And someone on Twitter suggested that we have like a really short way of expressing those things because you tend to just have one of those for every single field. So check out GRA on NPM. And then the last one I'll pick is Comitizen. And that is a project that I have worked on, and the goal is to make commit messages a little bit easier to work with and follow conventions. That's all I've got.
Cool. Thank you. Dimitri?
Everybody of us was using Bootstrap.js, but we never mentioned that we're using Teaser with it. It's awesome positioning library. It was like, it's so nice and invisible that we never make an intention to just go there and make some start because it's really cool and easy to use. And I really like Angular 2 Apollo. Really nice, and GraphQL IDE is really cool. What will be really cool is when the GraphQL will be easy to write on the back end. That's it.
Cool, cool. All right, Uri, what do you got for us?
Camille first.
Oh, I've got no picks, but I should definitely recommend you to read about GraphQL subscription because this thing is becoming like more popular and like close to the real-time feature. So it's nice to just don't be left behind. So yeah, that's the thing.
Cool.
And my picks are not technological. The first thing is the goal zero. The only thing I don't have a house. I just have a bag that everything I have is in it. And I always have this dream of going anywhere or be able to work anywhere. So I bought recently a thing called Goal Zero. It's a solar panel and a battery. And the amazing thing is that it actually charges my MacBook and my phone, and it's amazing. I can just go everywhere, and it actually works. It's crazy. And the second pick is Burning Man. I just came back 2 days ago, So sorry if I was a little bit off on the talk, but it's amazing. Like, everyone told me before that, and that it's like just like, yeah, it's amazing. You have to see it. It's undescribable. Like, everyone should go.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thanks so much, Uri, for joining us. Thanks for bringing Camille on with you, and thanks to all our panelists. Appreciate it. It was a great show. Thanks for dropping the knowledge on GraphQL.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.